Interest rarely ends all at once. It fades quietly, through small gestures, through actions that seem right, but slowly sabotage everything. Most men never understand why. And that's exactly why 8 mistakes that make women lose interest immediately hurt so much. Because it happens when everything seemed fine. 8 mistakes that make women lose interest immediately aren't obvious, aren't talked about, and almost no one explains them clearly. If you've ever felt a woman suddenly go cold without warning, this video is for you. And if you want to learn real psychology, emotional dynamics, and avoid these mistakes before it's too late, subscribe to the channel now. We're building a strong, conscious male community, and our goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers. Your subscription isn't just a click, it's a step toward never losing control of your emotional life again. TOPIC 1. Confusing availability with value. There's a silent mistake many men make without realizing it, believing that always being available increases their value. In his mind, replying fast, always being present, and never saying no, sounds like maturity and genuine interest. But in practice, it communicates something else, a life that revolves around her approval. And ironically, the more predictable he becomes, the less emotional impact he creates. Attraction doesn't die from lack of attention, it dies from excess without direction. An experienced mentor knows that value isn't explained, it's felt. When a man cancels commitments, changes plans, and abandons priorities just to be available, he reveals something dangerous. Internal scarcity, not a lack of time, but a lack of identity. It's like a movie you can pause, rewind, and watch anytime it loses urgency. And whether we like it or not, the human brain values what isn't always accessible. A simple example: he had training, studying, or important work, but drops everything because she texted. In the short term, it looks like care. In the long term, it becomes invisible weight. The man who keeps his routine, his commitments, and his direction communicates something far more attractive without saying a word. And that's exactly where a silent tension is born. Because when he's not always available, she starts wondering why, and that question opens the door to the next mistake. TOPIC 2. Trying to prove your value instead of living it. There comes a moment when many men believe they need to explain who they are to be valued. They talk too much about their job, how hard they work, what they've achieved, or what they plan to achieve. The intention seems good, but the effect is usually the opposite. When value needs to be announced, something has already lost its power. Secure people let their behavior speak for them, not their words. In real life, this shows up in small, almost invisible details. He justifies simple decisions, defends himself before being questioned, and turns light conversations into personal presentations. It's like trying to convince someone a watch is expensive by showing the receipt instead of letting them feel its weight and craftsmanship. The more he tries to control her perception, the less natural the connection feels. Men who truly live their value don't feel the need to prove anything. They speak less, choose their words carefully, and don't rush to fill silences. And that silence, interestingly enough, creates space for curiosity and respect. When he stops explaining himself all the time, something shifts in the dynamic. Because her attention stops being won by arguments and starts being drawn in by presence, setting the stage for the next even subtler mistake. TOPIC 3. Seeking emotional validation disguised as good intentions. Many men believe they're just being kind, attentive, and emotionally mature, when in reality they're seeking validation without realizing it. They overcompliment, agree with everything, and avoid any discomfort, not out of empathy, but out of fear of losing their place. The problem is that good intentions, when rooted in insecurity, carry a silent weight. And that weight is felt before it's understood. This pattern shows up when he constantly needs reassurance that everything is okay. He asks if she's upset, if he said something wrong, if things are fine, over and over again. Instead of projecting security, it communicates emotional instability. It's like he's silently saying, "Tell me I'm still safe here," and no one feels comfortable being someone else's emotional regulator. The man who doesn't seek validation learns how to hold his own emotional state. He compliments when it makes sense, listens without disappearing, and accepts silence without anxiety. That posture creates lightness, not pressure. And that lightness is exactly what separates care from neediness. When she realizes he doesn't depend on her reactions to feel okay, something shifts internally. leading straight into a mistake many people call love, but that actually starts where respect ends. Topic 4. Not having clear boundaries and calling it love. There's a delicate point where many men confuse emotional maturity with self-abandonment. They accept everything, let everything slide, and adapt to any situation, believing that's what evolved love looks like. But deep down, they're just avoiding conflict out of fear of losing the connection. And when a man doesn't protect his own boundaries, he teaches others not to respect them either. In daily life, this shows up when he swallows small discomforts that slowly pile up. He laughs at things that disrespect him, accepts constant plan changes, and tolerates behaviors that clash with his values. It's not out of conscious choice, but out of fear of being seen as difficult. But boundaries don't push away those who care. They filter out those who only stay when it's convenient. The man who sets boundaries doesn't need to raise his voice or give long speeches. He acts calmly, speaks less, and stands firm on what matters to him. That posture communicates emotional solidity, not rigidity. And interestingly, when he stops reshaping himself to fit, she begins to feel something rare, safety mixed with respect. But when those boundaries disappear, another mistake shows up, the one that turns the relationship into the center of everything way too fast. Topic 5. Putting the woman at the center of your life too early. There's a critical moment when many men, excited by the initial connection, reorganize their entire life around her. Their routine changes, personal interests fade, and everything starts revolving around the relationship. To him, it feels like devotion and emotional intensity. To her, it often feels like loss of balance and invisible pressure. When a man abandons hobbies, reduces time with friends, starts living according to her availability, something breaks internally. He stops being someone who chooses to be there and starts looking like someone who needs to be there. And neediness, even when silent, is felt. Healthy relationships grow when two full lives meet, not when one dissolves into the other. A centered man keeps his direction even when he's interested. He keeps training, working, studying, and taking care of his life, not as a tactic, but as identity. That creates natural admiration, not effort. And when she realizes she's not the center, but an important part of something bigger, the dynamic changes. The problem starts when that center is lost, leading straight to a very common mistake, reacting emotionally instead of choosing how to respond. Topic 6. Reacting emotionally instead of responding consciously. When something threatens the ego or emotional security, many men react on impulse. They change their tone, shut down, become sarcastic, confront, or pull away abruptly. In the moment, it feels like self-protection. But in reality, it reveals a lack of emotional control. Reaction is automatic. Response is a choice, and that difference changes everything in attraction dynamics. This shows up in simple situations. A message seen, but not answered. A last-minute cancellation, a misunderstood comment. Dead of breathing and observing, he creates stories in his head and acts from them. Sometimes he confronts too hard, sometimes he disappears to punish. But that behavior creates instability, and instability emotionally exhausts the person on the other side. The man who responds instead of reacts holds his internal state steady. He doesn't explain himself impulsively, accuse without clarity, or change behavior to provoke a reaction. That posture communicates emotional maturity and predictability, something rare and deeply attractive. And once he develops this skill, another mistake becomes obvious. One that involves talking about feelings without having the internal structure to support them. Topic 7. Talking about feelings without the internal structure to support them. These days, vulnerability is talked about a lot, and that's a good thing when it's understood properly. The problem starts when a man shares deep emotions without having the emotional stability to hold them. He opens up too much, too soon, hoping for connection, but ends up creating emotional weight. Vulnerability without foundation turns into emotional dumping, not intimacy. In practice, this happens when he turns the woman into his emotional confidant before there's real safety between them. He shares constant insecurities, unresolved trauma, and fears without context or balance. Instead of bringing them closer, it creates an uneven dynamic where she starts carrying emotions that aren't hers. Emotional connection doesn't come from intensity, it comes from consistency. An emotionally grounded man shares his feelings with clarity and self-control. He talks about emotions without handing over the steering wheel of his stability. That creates admiration, not concern. When vulnerability comes with inner strength, it pulls closer. When it doesn't, it pushes away. And that imbalance opens the door to the final mistake, the one that makes many men completely lose their direction. Topcock, losing your direction, trying to keep someone interested. There comes a point where the man no longer recognizes his own choices. He changes opinions, adapts values, and softens principles just to avoid friction. It all seems small at first, almost unnoticeable, but little by little, he drifts away from who he used to be, and that loss of direction is immediately felt by the person next to him. In everyday life, he starts saying whatever about everything, leaves important decisions in her hands, and abandons what once defined him. Not out of generosity, but out of fear of displeasing. But when a man doesn't take a stand, he stops being a reference point. And no one feels attracted to someone who doesn't know where they're going. The man who keeps his direction doesn't need to compete, convince, or beg for interest. He knows who he is, what he accepts, and what he won't negotiate. That clarity creates silent respect. When he loses himself trying to please, he also loses the tension that sustains attraction. And that's exactly where many men wake up too late. It's making one question unavoidable. How do you avoid all these mistakes before it's too late? Conclusion. If you made it this far, you already realize that losing a woman's interest is almost never bad luck. It's a pattern, repeated behavior. Now the question is simple and uncomfortable. Which of these mistakes are you still making without noticing? Where are you shrinking yourself, reacting impulsively, or trying to prove value instead of living with direction? Knowledge without action changes nothing. So pick one point, just one, and start today. Observe your behavior, adjust your posture, and take emotional responsibility. And tell me in the comments which of these mistakes hit you the hardest. If this content opened your eyes, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we talk about real psychology, no fantasy, for men who want respect, clarity, and control over their emotional lives. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription is part of that shift.